What is going on, everybody? Today we're going to show you how to replace the inner and outer tie rod ends on your 09 to 2012 F150. Probably also covers the 13 to 14 model years. We're going to start with loosening the lug nuts. We're using a 21 mil, which seems to be what everything is going to basically be. So we're going to crack these loose and jack the truck up now. All right, now we're going to remove the tie rod nut, which is also a 21 millimeter. So you can try two things here. You can try just tapping the ball joint at the end here. You don't want to damage it too much, because if you mushroom it, you won't be able to get it out of the hole here. You can also try hitting the knuckle itself here from kind of multiple sides to send a shock wave through the knuckle and cause a vibration to loosen up the tie rod end. And voila! So right now we're just removing the clamp in the boot to get at the inner tie rod end. I'll show you how to remove the clamp a little bit better when we can get it out here. It's kind of tight in here. Don't want to mess with trying to get the phone in there. All right, so our crescent wrench did not go big enough, and it was a 12-inch crescent wrench. So you probably need like a 15-inch that'll open big enough. You can see there's some flats on here going around the inner tie rod end once you get the boot pulled back. It was pretty tight, and we didn't have a whole lot of swing because where the A-arm starts to the CV shaft, you don't get a lot of movement. We were using a pipe wrench down there. So if you have the proper size wrench, it really helps, but just before I hit the CV shaft, it loosened up enough to where we got it cracked loose, and now should be able to just kind of spin it off like this after a while. Just keep going counterclockwise till it comes out all the way, and I'll show you guys how to get that boot clamp off. Alright, so you can see this little clip here. There's like a little finger that comes through the hole on the band. So you got to get like a flathead screwdriver or a pliers or something in here, this little loop, and just kind of pop it back like that. And you can see there's the little tab. So if you want to reuse this clamp, what you'll have to do is kind of squish your boot together. It's not very easy to do if you don't have the specialty tool for it. I will post a link in the video description where you can get that tool as well as all these parts. But basically you just pinch it back together and get it lined up, the tab through the hole, so that it locks back into place. You can also buy a new one. Now the new inner tie rod ends do not come with boots, so if you want to reuse your old ones, what I would recommend doing is before you take the nut off the tie rod, I would recommend cracking this jam nut loose and backing that off, so that way when you get the tie rod out, you can unscrew this part from the rod and slide the boot off. We forgot about having to reuse the boot, and we already had the tie rod out. Since we're not using this anymore, we just took the Sawzall, cut it right here, and now we just need a pliers to pinch this clamp together, slide the clamp off, and then we can get this boot off the inner tie rod end. Rust. Now we're gonna install the new inner tie rod end. You can see there's a little bit of red Loctite left over in there, but the kit did come with some new Loctite, so we're gonna put a little bit of that on just to make sure this doesn't back off. All right, so we are using all Moog parts for this. A little bit cheaper than factory, but still good quality. A lot higher than your typical Master Pro or lower entry levels at the auto parts store. So here's the part numbers. The inner tie rod ends are the same for both sides. These are the outers. Those are different part numbers. I will post links in the video description where you can get these. I'll also post OEM parts as well as some cheaper ones if you'd wish to purchase. All right, we'll take the new inner tie rod end now and drop it through the boot in this orientation shown here. Pull it through and slide the pinch clamp back on with pliers. Just a little afterthought here. It's kind of hard to see, but there's a little groove right there in the boot. That will lock into this groove on the tie rod end. So make sure that you have that set to the proper depth. Like so. Luckily the Moog came with a new jam nut, so we didn't have to struggle with trying to get that rusty one off. You may want to pull back on the rubber boot to get it started, just so you can see the threads a little bit better. Once you get it started by hand, keep spinning it by hand, and then eventually it's going to quit spinning in because the Loctite's going to bind up, and you're going to need to switch back to a pipe wrench or a crescent wrench. Looking back on this the way it's designed, you could probably wait to put the rubber boot back on until you're done tightening this, but live and learn. As far as tightness goes on this, we don't have any torque specs. You're just going to kind of want to go until you feel it bottom out, and then give it one good oomph tug with the crescent wrench or pipe wrench, whatever you're using. You obviously want it nice and snug and tight so it doesn't come loose, which is where the Loctite comes in, but you don't want to reef on it a lot more than you have to. You don't want to damage your steering rack. We've gone and put the grease zerk in the new outer end. Again, we just used pliers for that. So we're gonna go ahead and put the outer tie rod end on the inner now, and we're gonna use a little bit of anti-seize, but I can't stress this enough. Use full protection because it gets everywhere. Oh, that's too much. You're dead. You're dead. Jesus. Make sure you're using the left outer to the left side and the right outer to the right side. Also make sure you have your jam nut threaded on before you put the outer tie rod end on. That's like flaring a brake line before putting the nut on the end. There are flats that you can put a crescent wrench on for holding the inner tie rod end while you thread on the outer. It is a snug fit, at least with these Moog ones. Alright, so it does turn out that the outer tie rod, although different fasteners, they do have the same size, so these are 21 mil as well if you go with the Moogs. Tie rod end into place. Remember, on this truck they come from the top, not the bottom. Alright, now there's a couple ways you can try to set the length on this. You would want to do this before you cut it, if you did cut it, but you could try to measure. Obviously you'd want this straight, everything straight as possible, and measure from like the end of the threads to the outside of this if it's straight out, or you could try to measure from the outside of the threads to maybe the end of this rod or here. Just get it as close as you can. You're going to have to get an alignment done after this either way, but you want to get it close so that the truck doesn't handle dangerously until you get an alignment. Alright, so the outer tie rod end was getting a little hard to turn onto the inner, just kind of freehanding it. So once everything was bolted in, now we're just rotating the inner to set the proper length. This is a 15 millimeter if you want to use the correct size wrench. And if you have your inner tie rod end tight enough, like you should, it's not going to spin when you're rotating this. Alright, now grease the tie rod end if you got greasable ones. You obviously don't want to overinflate them to where they pop, because then they're basically junk already. You just want to get it to the point where you can see it start ballooning out and then quit. Alright, now it's time to reinstall the wheel. Everything looks different in this video. The truck is lifted a few inches, so if your knuckle doesn't look the same, it's because it's a stock one that's shorter. Tighten the lug nuts in a star pattern, 21 millimeter socket. The torque spec on these is 150 foot-pounds, which you'll want to retorque after 50 to 100 miles of driving. And that will wrap up the one side. I'm not going to film the other side because it's literally identical steps. Just pay close attention to what we did on this side. You may have noticed that we didn't put the inner clamp back on for the boot. That is because we don't want to fight it. We don't have the proper tool for it right now. So you can also use like a metal hose clamp from like the auto parts store, or if you're really struggling and you don't even have a clamp, you can use a zip tie at minimum. Just make sure you snip the zip tie excess off so it's not spinning around and hitting stuff. So that does it for this video. If it helped you out, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe, and click the bell notification button for more videos like this. Also, make sure to check me out on Facebook at Tony the Truck Guy. Thanks for watching.